what we have right now is there's a vacuum of leadership in Washington. You know, Joe Biden has his problems figuring out what flavor of ice cream he wants, much less actually being in charge. You've got Blinken, Sullivan, and Austin, each sort of pursuing their own ends. But the Israel got what I consider to be reliable sources, people that I know who they're talking to. Let me put it that way. The Israelis convinced themselves that they must launch a preemptive strike against Iran. Now, here's the logic. Israel, outside of the United States, has been the only country in the world that's gone out and bombed 4 other countries without those countries having initially attacked Israel. And Israel is preemptive. Now they're talking about doing it up to and including the use of nuclear weapons. And the irony is we're talking about this. Here we are on August 7th. This is the day after August 6th, commemoration of the 79th anniversary of the use of an atomic bomb in Hiroshima. August 9th, the same commemoration for the bombing of Nagasaki. And here's the Israelis talking about using these weapons. The U.S. intelligence community, particularly alarming, is the United States intelligence community has convinced itself that Iran's not going to strike back, that Iran is going to make some noise, but that they're afraid they're going to back off. And that, I think, is a very dangerous assumption on the part of our intelligence community, because instead of considering the other possibility that, in fact, Iran is taking very careful preparations to deliver a very effective blow on Israel, that in turn is likely going to lead Israel to further lash out and to escalate up to using nukes. They particularly want to use the nukes on the oil fields and some of what they call the nuclear facilities in Iran. But you know, I've been involved with some of the military.
Larry, what is the thinking process here? Because or really not even just historically, but all the way across, anyone who's had nuclear weapons, the idea has always been that they're a weapon choice of last resort. So only if your territory is physically threatened, existential threat, and all that kind of stuff. But Israel has quite an arsenal. I mean, they do still have quite a bit of conventional power. What would be the thinking to lead with a nuclear weapon instead of conventional weapons?
To intimidate. It's the Israelis. Maybe it's not even most of the Israelis, but let's call it these Zionists, these ultra-nationalists. They've convinced themselves that they've got such a powerful military, and that with demonstrations of force like this, that they can force the Iranians and the Hezbollah fighters to flee in terror. That it's really sort of reminiscent of the kinds of delusional thinking we saw in Ukraine with respect to their counteroffensive and the offensive they launched in 2023. That they and you had U.S. generals backing this, genuinely believed that all they had to do was start this attack, and that the Russians would go, "Oh my God, we've got to run away." Well, that didn't happen. It was just the opposite. And that's the mistake that Israel's getting ready to make here, because the preparations that Iran is making are being made with Russia and with China. People forget that they have been conducting joint military exercises for scenarios just like this for more than 5 years. You don't carry out those exercises unless you also have plans in place that you can pull off the shelf, and you know what you're going to do in terms of supplying electronic warfare, air defense systems. The possibility that both China and Russia could provide Iran with hypersonic missiles, which Israel has no defense against, zero. And I think that, in fact, I believe that Russia has supplied those to Iran with the proviso that Iran cannot use them unless they are attacked again and more openly by Israel. Then then it's game on, and this thing goes up the escalatory ladder.
Okay, now let's look at that part as well. So because we have some other things to share here about the circumstances that could prompt some of these attacks, especially in retaliation from the Iran/Hezbollah, because that's an equal part of this equation probably. But let's look at the thought process again. Okay, if Israel was just thinking about what they would want to do to Iran, and it's in isolation, and it's only those two states, then you can say, okay, yeah, if they have nukes and the other side doesn't, then the other side has powers to do anything.
Right.
But it's not in isolation. And the idea that Russia and China, nuclear powers, would be passive in the face of them being used on one of their allies just seems ludicrous beyond compare. Is Israel just thinking that, well, yeah, but they, meaning Iran, Russia and China, would not use their nuclear weapons on us in that situation? They would just get mad about it. They wouldn't do anything. I mean, what could be the thinking there? Because, and let me actually put you in the position for the moment of looking at things from the Chinese or the Russian responses. How would they view an Israeli use of nuclear weapons?
They would see it as crossing a red line, because they would view it that Israel was doing this with the full permission, support of the United States. And so they'll say, okay, all these other actions that the United States is taking militarily against us has the ultimate goal of using nukes.
And what is the range of their potential? Let's look at one at a time. What would be the range of possible responses to this theoretical use of Israeli nuclear weapons, first of all, by Russia? What might they do? What's the range?
They will provide Iran weapons that could destroy much of Israel, would be my guess. It's not just going to be Russia. Turkey's going to be forced to respond in a way that up to this point, Erdogan, as we've talked about, has just been a bag of hot air. But this would be the game changer, because the people. I had someone on my blog the other day that sent me a note, because I'd written something about Egypt and said that Egypt was friendly with Israel, and the woman that wrote me is Egyptian. She was outraged. She says, we're not friends of Israel at all. And so that within the Egyptian, and Doug MacGregor's talked about this before as well on your show, that at the street level in these countries, the public pressure is going to become so great, it's going to force the governments to respond. So I could see Russia's not just going to supply Iran with weapons, but I think they'll actually put personnel on the ground that can assist Iran. And if nukes have been used, this is, we're going to be somewhere we've never been before. And the initial reaction to the shock that will spread around the world. This is what's certain out of this is Israel will no longer be recognized as a legitimate state. The majority of the world will no longer tolerate Israel, and I think you could see the rise of. Some have feared anti-Semitic attacks. I think Jews in general would be in danger around the world then. The efforts to retaliate against them would be so great that they had crossed this line. And that's what this Israeli leadership's not thinking about.
Yeah.
They're thinking about only the use of force without what are the political implications. It's not going to make you more welcome, more embraced, more loved, more supported. It's going to leave you more isolated, and not just people, we're not going to invite them to our dinner party kind of isolation. This is, they'll view them as, these people are crazy. They can't be allowed to have these weapons. They must be stopped.
Once they show that they have it, of course, now then you've got it's even more complicated than that, because now then the thought, well, they've used them here, they can do it again. So now then there's fear of nuclear escalation. So that could mitigate people, but it definitely will, I think on a personal level, will create the possibilities for genuine anti-Semitism on an in-person level to countries all over the world where Jews live. And so the Israeli government in that event would put their own people at risk. But I want to look at the other half of that equation before we get off of this topic. Chinese side, because they also have their own issues that are different from Russia's, even if they're somewhat related. What do you see the range of possible reactions from Beijing?
Yeah, they're going to be providing the material support to Iran as well. But I think they're looking at this as, they're not just focused on Iran. Because they see this, they're hearing the rhetoric from the United States that China's the enemy. Not that China's an adversary, not that China's a competitor. China's the enemy, and that we must be prepared, the United States must be prepared to go to war with China. And so, the Chinese are hearing that, and then they're looking at what the United States is doing. Because I know, the Chinese know, the Russians know that Israel's attack on Hania in Tehran was planned and was at least coordinated with the United States in advance. And how do we know that? Because the dispatch of the Marine MEU to the region, that decision was taken well before Israel launched that attack. Those units, as they don't just call them up and they're not like the firefighters. You call them up and in 5 minutes they're out of the fire station, headed out. And the other carrier task force that are deployed, again, to outfit those ships and the logistics required to get them ready. This is a planned escalation on the part of the United States, and Russia and China are seeing that. And I think they are now prepared to respond accordingly, without necessarily tipping their hands right off the bat. But this thing is so dangerous because it goes beyond just the Israel bombing a bunch of Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, and let's look at the other part of that equation, because none of those things can be lost on either Iran or Hezbollah, and so they may have their own motivation to try and preempt, or to even more so to do a counterstrike based on the assassinations that have taken place on their territory here in just the last number of days. Here is what Hassan Nasrallah said about a week ago after, I think, one of the assassination attempts in Beirut. Watch his comments.
Now they're in a state of joy, and they're proud of themselves that in a few hours we killed Sayyid Muhsin in Dahi in southern Beirut, and we killed the leader, the Marti Haniya in Tehran, and a few days ago we struck Hudaydah in Yemen, and so they can't see in front of them because they're so proud. Okay, laugh a bit and you'll weep a lot, because you don't know what red lines you have crossed and what kind of aggression you carried out and where you've taken the situation. Hence, yes, we, for the enemies and the friends, on all of these supportive battlefronts, now we've entered a new phase.
Now we've entered a new space. Now, a lot of the complaints about Nasrallah, some of it has some justification behind it over the years, is that he's a lot of hot air. He says things he doesn't mean. He's just talking to his domestic people to keep them happy, but he's never going to actually take any action here offensively. How do you see that?
People just aren't paying attention to what's been going on over the last 6 months. It's like they say, well, we're going to see if Hezbollah is going to launch an attack. They've been attacking. They've been launching missiles and rockets into Israel, 10 to 12 times a day over the last month. I mean, if that's not some offensive action, I don't know what else you call it. So, and it's been effective to the point that Israel had to evacuate all of the settlements up north, and all these people are staying in hotels. I guess it's around 100,000 people at least. And Hezbollah's been hitting Israeli military bases, and there's both intelligence collection sites as well as patrol bases. And Israel, for its part, has been bombing Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon. So, you know, the war is going on. Now, what we're looking at is whether or not Hezbollah will step it up to a level that they will literally try to flood the zone with, instead of launching a dozen missiles or rockets, that they'll launch hundreds or maybe even thousands in a coordinated attack with the Houthis and with Iran to overwhelm Israel's air defense system. And the question is whether Israel will follow up on its vow that it's going to invade.